Hello, everybody. At this opening of Angewandte Festival, I'm both honored and personally thrilled to welcome Tania Bruguera, who is joining us from Havana, despite all technical difficulties. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Tania. Most of you will know of Tania Bruguera's work, but we have actually had little chance to see it or her in Austria. And we also missed the chance to do so this year as Wiener Festival had to cancel most of its program in May and June. Tania Bruguera will only introduce her very briefly, is an artist and activist whose performances and installations are interventions into the institutional structure of collective memory, of education, and of politics. And while she has worked mainly in activist practices, she has received many prestigious honors and awards, such as the Robert Rauschenberg Award, the Guggenheim Fellowship, and many others. And her work has been extensively exhibited around the world, including at the Tate Turbine Hall Commission and the Documenta. As the University of Applied Arts, which does not only, a term that does not only describe use-oriented art forms, but also art that is able to directly engage with society, Angewandte has a lot of interest in your work and a long-standing interest in your work. And I would like to take up, to start our conversation with one of the terms that you have coined, arte utile, because in his which just concluded right before we went online, Pierre Bast, our university president, actually has directly referred to this term, which does not only describe useful art, but the use of art as a tool, as an instrument. Is that right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In a way, I think it's interesting that there is a kind of a craft-like approach to this term. And I was wondering what are the skills necessary to work with art as a tool to make it useful?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for the patience, technological patience. And yeah, you're right about my presentation in Vienna, but next year in the Vienna Festival, the work is going to be shown, so you will see it there. Mm-hmm. So yes, in terms of arte utile, the first thing that I'm glad that you explained is that in Spanish, útil, the word has more than one meaning. It's tool by which to do something that you use to achieve something, and also it is the useful aspect of it. I think I like more the idea of tool because it doesn't have this bad moral option of useful, like for the personal benefit, because arte utile is the opposite, is to put art in the service of people. And it is also, I always call it citizen art, because it's the art that will be generated by the needs of the people, and also will be many times solved and proposed by the people itself. Mm-hmm. So in this sense, I also think arte utile is a way to enter into a bigger and broader conversation, social conversation in society, because you're not coming from the perspective of the expert. Mm-hmm. Because the artist is not the expert. The artist is someone that has the training to use this tool, but is not an expert. The expert is the person who has the problem, who has the emotional and historical knowledge of their own problems. So that is already something that I'm very interested at, because many times we struggle between for whom is the art, or people doing social art, but really is for the people in the arts and not for the social or the groups. And I think this kind of approach will somehow, at least not solve, but somehow propose something that integrates art into people's everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I have to say that I have to be very careful, because the more the concept is being used, the more sometimes it's being changed. And it is important. I always say this phrase is not art to make things better, mm-hmm. but to make things work different. Mm-hmm. Because it's not a kind of neoliberal proposal where you make the system function It's the opposite. It's people trying to propose something that will disrupt the system with their own perspective, you know?
Yeah, I think this is really a central point, because definitely in the last few months, many professional branches were considered indispensable. Among them, many that were of little prestige and remuneration, jobs in healthcare, medical care, farmhands, bus drivers, supermarket employees, etc. So in a crisis, sometimes art is considered of little systemic importance, but it may be of high social importance. And I think it's important to make this differentiation that arte may come, arte utile may come in times of systemic crisis, but not to make the system work, function better, but actually to implement social criterion and social bonds, right?
No, I agree with you. And I think the other day, a friend of mine sent me a photo of a newspaper, I think in England, that had the list of the most, the less needed jobs, and artist was the first one. And I think it's because we see art as entertainment. You know, art has become entertainment, and art is a process of extreme and excruciating and sincere and deep search inside yourself. It's not entertainment, you know. So it could be used for that. But the problem is that we are living in a system in which one option is given. It's either entertaining or it's not interesting, you know. So I think this is what we're also trying to fight, you know. Or it's a commodity, either entertainment or commodity, and we don't fit in neither of those.
Yeah. I mean, we are living in a country that comfortably leans on art and culture to promote its self-identity as a tourist destination, as an attractive country to live and work in. But when we came out of lockdown as well, there was no concept, no plan, or nothing first for art. So this is somehow has a lot to do, although of course there would have been lots of means in our country to actually help the arts, or keep the arts going, right? And to help them help artists get on their feet. So there's definitely this gap between systemic and social importance, right?
Absolutely.
I noted something else when I actually went through a book that you have recently completed. I'm not sure if it's published yet, with Claire Bishop, a conversation with Tania Bruguera, and it contains a lot of really interesting conversations. Absolutely recommend it. And you once described arte utile, I think it was in this book, as bringing the urinal back into the bathroom.
Yes.
Literally, when you actually installed a urinal signed Armata.
Twice.
And this is an ironic gesture in many ways. It's not only an ironic gesture, but it's an ironic gesture in many ways, as when in 1917, Elsa van Freytag-Loringhoven's and Marcel Duchamp's urinal was actually rejected by the Society of Independent Artists. Their explanation was that it may be very useful in its own place, but its place is not an art exhibition. Of course, it's the bathroom, right? So, but what I found ironic now is that the question of its utility was already central right at the start. Where is this thing useful? It's really
absolutely. No, I think it was actually, it's very funny because that idea didn't come as an art piece. It came as the last phrase of a speech I gave a few years ago in 2009. And a friend of mine now, by then I didn't know him, Tom Finkerpro, was interviewing Teddy Cruz, who is a very, very good architect and doing amazing social projects with architecture and urbanism. And he actually told him this. And he said, "Oh, great, this is your idea." I say, "No, it's Tania's idea," because he heard me giving the speech. And then Tom approached me and I said, "Well, actually, I have a project for many years now that is called the Suite Duchamp, which is, just thinking about some of these pieces and so on." And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Let's do it." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." And we found it, and it is now in the Queen's Museum permanently. So it is actually, and it's funny because back then we didn't know so much that it was not his work, but the woman artist's work, like the urinal. So I think it has also more layers. And actually, the urinal is in the men's bathroom, so it's a misogynist artwork because you can only see it if you are able to enter that, you know. But also beyond the joke, I think part of what happened is that we can only return the urinal now because it was the controversy it had, you know. So because it was such an iconic demand for restitution of and rethinking of what art is. My problem was not with the first gesture. I think the first gesture was great, was clear, etc. My problem is how, as an artist, was how unsatisfying it was to find that a canon. And the canon was that something that is not useful can be by default artistic. Yes. And that is not, I don't agree with that argument in neither way, no, neither because it has no use, it's artistic, and also that has generated decades, almost a century, because we already a century passed, of work that is based on that argument. And that is not really very interesting. It's just by default becoming art, instead of being a process of rethinking what art. I think art is when you rethink what art is, in a way.
Which was done at the beginning, right? In a way, with this gesture.
And also, at some point I was like, my God, already a century, we still with this argument. It's kind of like, so much.
At the beginning, the practical usefulness of the thing was considered a hindrance to being used as an art object, right? So, but somehow this must have shifted as uselessness.
I think I don't want to be categorical, but I think it shifted in a way because the interference of the art market. The interference of the art market, because before the distribution and access to art was very, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying it was very clear. It was in the church. It was in the house of important people or rich people or whatever. And with the openness that it can go to everyone, something new happened. But then somehow the classes with some economic access were able to put it back under their space. And then there is the tension we have lived for, I think, too long between to whom the art belongs, no? Yeah.
This brings me to this thought of, if you take an everyday object out of its everyday context and place it into a museum, it becomes, its function is lost, and then it may become art. That actually brings me to another observation that I particularly admire in your work, and that is your observation on the impact of time on attention, especially in art. And one of the other terms, we may mention a few more terms during our conversation, but one of the other terms you coined is political timing specificity, developed to supplement, so to say, site specificity. And indeed, I believe that one of the most difficult things in bringing art and politics together is the question of finding not only the right place, but the right pace, in a way, slowing down the engagement. And art once was the realm of slowing down perception, but this is not at all the case anymore, right?
Well, a few things. First of all, when you start saying about the object taking off the use value and put it in a museum, another thing that happens is that the museum takes ownership of the right to decide what is art and what is not art, taking it away from the people who feel it or decide because they feel it, even if they don't understand. So I think that also have contributed to this kind of expertise culture that we live in the arts that is problematic, and we can talk later about it. In terms of that, I totally agree with you. Sometimes when you work with political issues, it's not only, sometimes you need to slow down, sometimes you need to make it quicker. So not always slow down. I think what art can do is catalyze, you say, like a catalyst, to understand what is the emotional moment? What is the emotional ambience, let's say, or circumstances in which the people are? Because artists, not everybody, but some artists have the great capacity to understand what other people feel, no, and then put it out there. And sometimes in politics, in political art, you need to slow down, because sometimes you need to think, you need to feel, you need to think, you need to learn how to feel again, which is one of my arguments. And for example, the piece I did for the Tate Turbine was about that, was art and museums, institution that can feel. Can institution feel? Because they're representing us, no? And they did an amazing job. They actually, you know, the director, Frances Morris, surprised me because she went beyond my proposal, which is amazing. And she took the challenge. But I think it's about, we're living in moments where we are not being represented by politics. A lot of people understand that as I want engaged, and then their life is even worse. But I think there are other people who once, when they don't feel the politics represent them, they want to either involve themselves in politics or to create alternative institutions. And they start saying, okay, maybe one of the bases of democracy is institutions that defend certain principles. And if they don't have any out there, well, I'll do my own one. You know, not for the ego, you know, but just for the sake of having a public conversation about we're missing this. And I think that's one thing that in which I see a very big political agency from artists, not only to say what others are thinking, but to build up things that people think will be impossible, or where people feel, well, I'm complaining, that's all I can do. The artist can come and say, no, you can build something. You know, artists are really good at imagining something and making it happen for real. And a lot of people, a lot of citizens don't arrive to that part. They want something, and sometimes they don't have the tools to build it up. Sometimes they keep frustrated. And that's why I think art can be useful too, you know?
Yeah, to establish communities, conversations, but also to concretely build systems, alternative systems.
Yeah. And you can, the important for me in this system is that you understand that they should exist as long as they work. And maybe somebody see it and take it over and do it better, and then it's fine. You know, the artist should not be egocentric, like, oh, it's my institution. No, if somebody took it and did it better, congrats. That's the job, you know, done. Yeah.
This has also a lot to do with not only being an artist's craft, but actually to handing over control, right?
But there is craft in handing over control.
Yes.
Because I think there is very important, because many times, and this is I've said many times, is that when you do this kind of projects, institutional projects or social projects, where you're working with others, it's as important how you started and how you set up a dynamic and an environment that is safe or challenge or whatever. Is as important that as it is to finish it. Because sometimes if you finish too soon, then you can destroy people's work, other people working with you. If you finish the wrong way or for the wrong reason, then people get frustrated, and you can do more damage sometimes, you know?
Absolutely.
That's why I think more how to end the project than how to start it. I'm quick at starting projects. I take a lot of thinking when I think that moment has arrived to close it or to pass it on. Sometimes you don't close it, you just give it to somebody else.
You need to take care of what kind of consequences a project entails and where to hand over, and also acknowledge maybe that if you go further, there's a loss of control over the consequences. Maybe you have a specific experience from when because this is really an interesting point, I think, in activist art projects, and also this is also the point where many artists get blamed for things they did not do or did not accomplish, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think when you are an artist activist, sometimes, not always, the energy or the will to start a project comes from a personal and intimate desire or hope or anger or this, discuss with what is happening out there. But once you put the project out, when you have people working with you, when you create a system, you become responsible for the other people as well. And it's not your work anymore. You don't do, that's why it's so hard to do social art and arte útil and stuff, because you start for your own desire, you have to transform that and transfer that to somebody else, somebody who also has the same desire. And I give you an example. I did a project that is a long-term project called Cátedra Arte de Conducta, which is a school, alternative art school in Cuba for political performance as a way to do political art and social art. And after 5 years, I usually work in 5 years. It's a socialist system. And and at the 5th year, the project was already, functioning, working very well. It was very clear. The other thing with this kind of project is at the beginning, it's not clear for anybody. People are, what is this person doing? Why they do it? So for me, this is the most interesting part, because you can grow beyond your own ideas. But then at the 5th year, I say, guys, we have accomplished this. Like, I don't know, around 60 or 70 artists have been passing through this or more, because we have like 14 every year, 12 plus like 13 or 14 every year. So, and this is it. We wanted to have a new generation of artists, and so this is, and they rebel. The guys who were I don't call it a student, I say the participants, they say no. They say, no, we don't want to close it.
Okay.
It's not time yet.
We have not graduated yet.
And then I was like, well, I guess I have to say, okay, let's keep going. And we worked 3 more years, So I think this is, but then I explained to them after, the last year, I say, okay, these are my reasons. The reason I want to close it is because all of you are ready, but they still we say in Spanish, taking for the cow teats. I don't know how you say in English. You're still milking, and you're ready to go in the world and do your own projects. And you need to, liberate, and you need to rebel against all these projects, and you need to, and if when I did the project, there was emptiness and there was a need for it, now we don't have the need for the project. And that's another thing that is very difficult for this kind of project. Artists, we have an hedonistic side. This is real. And it's hard for us to say, this work is not needed anymore.
Yes.
And this is very hard. But for saying this, you need to have prepared people very well. You have to have an educational side of the project where people understand what tools they have. I have another project that I don't want to say the name, but that I did, where we did a transitional period after 5 years again, where we did a 1-year school to give tools to the people, etc. And then one person who was not part of the community, but was an artist, took over the project and took that opportunity as a weakness of the project for her to make the project hers and appropriate herself with the project, which is completely against the project, And that was a bad situation, where somebody sees that as an opportunity to give a coup d'etat instead of understanding. And then it went so bad that then the project is split, imploded, because people were already used to take decisions, to not having a boss, and then that was a tough one.
That is interesting. Absolutely. I mean, this is, I also wonder, as you mentioned, we mentioned that we were going to participated in Festwochen, and probably, I do hope that you will be doing this project, which would have been the School of Integration with image teaching.
Although I have to say,
festival
I have
about
to,
spirituality.
I have to say that I have to think again, because Milo Rao has challenged me, because now he wants to do a school of resistance,
Yes.
which I like more.
Yes, I remember. We are at the end of our time, of the allotted time already, and I would just like to thank everybody for joining us in this conversation, and especially thank you so much, Tania Bruguera. I do hope that we will see more of you and your work soon in Vienna, either in the School of Resistance or Celebration, and let's hope also for a better time for life art. I will now ask the curatorial team of Angewandte Festival, Lena Kohlmeier and Eva Maria Stadler, to take over, as the festival will continue both online and all over the city of Vienna at selected spots. So thank you so much, Tania, for joining.
See you next year in the festival,
the
Vienna Festival. Yeah. Thank you. Good luck with your project.
Mm-hmm.